Hey AP Euro students! Today we are finally going to start the first chapter in AP European History, and that is the Renaissance. I wanted to talk to you for just a minute and show you what we're going to be doing for every chapter in this class. You will see here on the screen there is a skeleton outline, which means there's a lot of missing parts to it. So what your job is going to be is follow along with these PowerPoint recordings that I have and make sure you fill in the missing parts. So you can see here, you have a space here for what the Renaissance is, where it began, why, and I think once you get the hang of it, you'll understand a little bit better how this works. The good news about this being a recording, you can stop it, pause it at any time, and go back if it's going too fast. So, of course, if you have any questions, if you're a virtual only student, you can email me. Remember, you can always schedule a Zoom meeting with me. I am always going to be available to you, and we can work out a specific time. All right, let's get started. One more thing. If you don't have access to a printer, you can just use this outline as a guide to take down your own notes, okay? But if you do have a printer, that would be ideal for you to print this off, and then you can write on it as we go over the PowerPoint together. Before we begin filling in the outline, I want to give you a quick little introduction about what was going on right before the Renaissance took place. So I want you all to think about a time period in history, some of you may be familiar with this, called the Middle Ages, the medieval period. And that lasted roughly about 1,000 years. And in the Middle Ages, the people rarely left their village. They literally were born and then they died in that very same village. Hardly ever left and traveled and did really anything outside that particular place. Also, the people of the Middle Ages, they thought of their lives to be very insignificant. Life was short. All you really focused on was working hard, and pleasing the Catholic Church, because that was the center of society at this time in history. And so people were trying to do everything they could to make sure that their lives were lived according to the way the church wanted, so that they, when they did die, they would be able to go to heaven in the afterlife. So again, they really didn't put a lot of emphasis on their lifestyles. Well, then things begin to change, and we have this new period called the Renaissance, where people are going to change the way they think and they behave. A person of the Renaissance believed that humans have dignity and worth. They want to enjoy their life here on earth and not just sit around and wait for them to die and just hope that you can get to heaven. They put a lot more meaning into their life. And you start wondering, well, why? Why is there this change going on between those of the Middle Ages, known as the Dark Ages because of so much war and famine and really was a miserable time to live, to now this Renaissance period? What's bringing about this change? Well, it all started with this rediscovery, rebirth. In fact, that's what the Renaissance, actually the word Renaissance is a French word that means rebirth. So look at this beginning of our outline. So if you want to put this on the what. So what is the Renaissance? Again, just the word itself, it's French, and it means rebirth. So what is being rediscovered? You know, what has been neglected for a number of years? The ancient Roman and Greek culture. So it's basically the classics, okay? The literature and the history from the ancient Roman times, the architecture and the philosophy from the Greek Roman times. So these Italian intellectuals are rediscovering these classic works. And we know that there's going to be this great admiration for how the ancient Greek and Roman people lived. The people of the Renaissance admired their lifestyles and basically want to live like the Greek and Romans did all those years ago. If you hear or read the word antiquity, that just means Greco-Roman civilization. So I wanted you to be familiar with that term. You might see it in your textbook. You might see it on a quiz or a test. So again, just want to point out, some vocabulary words that you might come across. All right, so we've established what the Renaissance is. By the way, if I haven't brought this to your attention, definitely want to know the time period, 1300 to about 1600. So if I ask about centuries, when did the Renaissance take place, what century, we're looking at the 14th century through the 17th century. So 1300s being 14th century, and then of course the 1600s being the 17th century. So start getting used to that if you're not familiar with how to figure out centuries, because you definitely need to know that for this class. All right, next, where did the Renaissance originate? Florence, Italy. Now, Italy doesn't look like the Italy we know today back in the 1300s. Let me show you a quick map for reference. This is a map of Italy back in the period of the Renaissance. You can see here Italy is divided into what are called city-states. And city-states basically operate independently like their own separate country. So see, you've got the Kingdom of Naples, the Kingdom of Sicily, you've got the Papal States, which is where Rome is, the Pope is here. You've got the Republic of Florence. So, of course, this is where the Renaissance originates. You've got the Republic of Venice here. And then you've got several of these duchies. And when I say like the Duchy of Milan or the Duchy of Savoy, duchy just basically means there's a duke or a duchess in charge. Okay, so that's all that word, and it's D-U-C-H-Y if you're trying to spell that out. So that map of Italy that I just showed you, I have put a copy of it on Canvas for you, again, as reference. You can either print it out or just refer to it whenever necessary. But it's always good to know geographically where we're talking about and what, of course, it looks like at the time period we're studying. So Italy looks very different back in the 1300s than it does today. All right, so why is the Renaissance originating in Florence? Of all those city-states, why there? And it's because there's this renewed trade with the East that has flowed into Europe, which is considered the West. So basically, you have the Mediterranean Sea that is a major hub for all this trade that's taking place. And so Florence is going to be where the money is coming in. So let me repeat that one more time to make sure we know why the Renaissance began in Florence, Italy. It's where renewed trade with the East flowed into Europe, which is considered the West, through the Mediterranean Sea, and therefore through the Italian peninsula. So that again brought all this money and wealth into the Italian city-states, specifically Florence. So if you were of anybody of importance, you were in Florence during this time. Now, the Renaissance doesn't just stay in Florence, Italy. It will spread to other parts of Europe, specifically the northern part of Europe, around 1450. So make sure you're filling that in on your outline. And then know that in England, which is considered further north, but you have to remember England is not part of what's called continental Europe. It is separated, okay? But it is, part of Europe. It's just not connected with the rest of Europe. England, the Renaissance didn't begin there until the 16th century, and it will last to the early part of the 17th century, which we all know is the big time for Shakespeare. So it will hit England, but much later than the rest of Europe. So that's important for you to remember. All right, next, let's take a look at the people of the Renaissance. We know that the culture applied almost exclusively to the upper classes. And it's because they had the luxury of time to spend learning the classics. So I'm hoping that will make a little bit more sense to you, because you've got those that are part of the peasantry. They are largely illiterate, so they're not going to be affected as much by what happens with the Renaissance. All of these new writings that are coming out just don't really mean much to the peasants because they can't read or write. We know that the working class and the merchants, they're preoccupied with concerns of their daily life. They're just trying to survive. So it's the upper class that will be affected the most by all of this Renaissance culture. They obviously have enough money so that they can enjoy the things that the Renaissance has to offer, and of course learn the classics, which is what it's all about. All right, so now we are ready to look at section 2 of our outline. We've already spent some time going over when the Renaissance took place, what it is, where it took place, why, and how some of the people are going to be affected. So next we're going to take a look at the actual Italian city-states themselves and how they are going to, rise in power. We have northern Italian cities that are developing, international trade. So remember, these city-states independently operate like a country. Some examples, as you can see here, you've got the Republic of Venice, Genoa, and Milan, just to give you a couple of examples. So in each of these city-states, they specialize in their own type of trade. For example, Venice was known for its beautiful glass making. Milan was basically the fashion capital for so many years. So see, each one have their own little specialized area of trade. Well, by 1300, a type of rule that you had, it could be one of two things. You had what the Italians call a signori, which is the Italian word for despot. And if you don't know what a despot is, this is basically someone who has complete and total control over their people. They don't care much about the people that they rule over, and a lot of these people are very ruthless, these despots. So the Italians refer to them as the signori, or you may have what's called an oligarchy in charge of a city-state. And an oligarchy is basically when you have a group of wealthy businessmen, in this case, merchant aristocracies. So very wealthy men who have a particular business. So either they are controlling, they are in charge of a city-state, or you have a despot in charge. So either way you look at it, this is the Italian peninsula where we're focused. Now we know on your outline, there's a little A right here before we go to number 2. It says guild. If you'll go ahead and just fill that in by listening to that definition. What a guild is, it's an association of workers in charge of a particular business. Okay? Again, association of workers in charge of a particular business. So those guilds back then were very, very powerful. They controlled a lot of the production process, as well as they restricted entry into various trade. So If you were a worker, you were a part of these guilds.